Again, this session is part of the Torah of the Earth classes that so far has happened on Tuesday at 8 p.m. And it's it's been a number of them, and they're on pearlstonecenter.org/online, along with a whole bunch of other classes and sessions. And this one would be pearlstonecenter.org/Torah, and all these classes are over there. And this one is about Lag BaOmer. So Lag BaOmer is the 33rd day of the Omer, and we're in the Omer is the ancient and contemporary counting of the grain harvest. So the earliest part of the grain harvest comes in Pesach, when barley. And this is not an exact, and even in the land of Israel, it's not exact. Obviously, they wouldn't happen at the same time. Hello, nice name. If you want to put on your video and interact too, that would be awesome. So the agricultural cycle span of production spent in Israel, and also the dry season anywhere in that range of the world across the globe, is around 6 months. So you have the 6 months of the growth and the work, and then the 7th month is when everything is gathered in and there's rest, and then you have the 6 months of the rainy, cold, dark, and wet cycle, and then you get reborn into the growth cycle again. So the beginning of the growth cycle is Pesach, and that's like the spring when everything is sprouting, the lambs are being born, the grain is ripening, and it's the new year, so it's like the growth of the new year of the person as well. It's like a spiritual growth of restarting again. And then halfway through that, and 1 month later, you have Pesach Sheni, the second Pesach. So if the spring is the second chance, the reborn, the renewal of life, the second Pesach is the concept of it's never too late. So even halfway through the Omer, even halfway through the grain harvest, even halfway through growing. Hello, Aaron. It's good to see you. Even halfway through growing, even halfway through any process, it's never too late. You can actually start again. Not that there's a second chance. You can start away halfway through the mess up. You can just start again. You could just have a Pesach, and then once you already were supposed to be done with your Pesach, you can. That's Pesach Sheni. Lag BaOmer is the 33rd day of the Omer, and in some ways, it's connected to Pesach Sheni. So where Pesach Sheni has minored itself in a way, and Lag BaOmer has moved up in sort of ascending importance in Jewish practice, because not this year, but the custom has come to be a pilgrimage to Meron. And as it stands right now, not this year because of plagues, but as it stands right now, there's a bigger pilgrimage to Meron than any of the 3 pilgrimage festivals of the Hebrew calendar. So the 3 pilgrimage festivals of the Hebrew calendar is Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot, which is capping the 6 months, the 7-month cycle. And it's the beginning, middle, and end of the agricultural cycle. Shavuot is the middle. And this process of counting the Omer is counting 7 days, which makes a week, and then 7 weeks, which equals 49, until you get to the 50th, which is the Shavuot, which is the middle of the agricultural cycle. At that point, you're done with the grain harvest, and you shift to the tree harvest. And this is and spiritually, it's a different mindset. So the mindset of grains is an annual mindset, one that is limited to hello, Rachel, it's good to see you. an annual mindset, which is my life, the trajectory of my life, and my accomplishments of what I'm accomplishing. The tree part of the year is learning to see things like a tree does, which is perennial. It's not just one life going in sprouting up and then going into the ground, but it's fruit which keeps sort of spilling out, living and then spilling out into back into the earth. But there's a tree there that is many generations, like a family tree. And that's the idea that I plant now for my grandchildren, and I enjoy the environment that my grandparents made. And therefore, I am living with the results of their actions, and the results of my actions will be on my grandchildren. And that's not fair according to an annual cycle, but it's the tree of life according to the perennial cycle. And the Torah is given on Shavuot, which is where we transfer from everything's fair in my life, everything's about my life. Instead of that, I transfer to the tree of life. It's everything I'm doing now is building the environment for my grandchildren, and everything that I'm experiencing now is the environment that my grandparents made. So that's what happens at Shavuot, that shift. And now we're in the Omer, which is the counting through the grain to be able to reach tree knowledge. Halfway through the Omer, you move from the barley harvest into the wheat harvest. So the barley harvest is the grain that is more readily available and fed to like sheep and goats, and you feed them barley, and you can also, it's also for people. And then wheat comes to the more, in the Jewish agricultural prejudice, wheat is the more refined and intellectual grain. But it's not, it doesn't even compare to the tree of life. That's beyond even rational, right? So why should I care about about 3 generations into the future, 4 generations into the future? What does it have to do with me? Right? So it's even beyond just the rational mind. It's realizing that if I just went according to my rational mind, according to my annual cycle of thinking, according to my wheat mind, even the highest refined level of intellectual development, which is like wheat, even that has to be let go to be able to attain tree knowledge. So halfway through is the shift between barley, which is like the more staple and coarser motivations, to the higher intellectual motivations. And then Shavuot is letting go of all of that. Even delicate intellectual refinements, you let go of that too. And you embrace the tree. So Lag BaOmer is sort of that crossing point where the barley harvest, or we say the spiritual barley harvest, is over, and the wheat harvest is now fully in place. There's no actual line, because the barley harvest goes like that, and then the wheat harvest starts here and then continues. And there's a middle point where you're both wheat and barley, but by the time you get to Shavuot, it's all wheat. It also is layered with the time of the animals. So on Pesach, animals and us are born. It's like, and it used to be that human beings were also born on that cycle, so there would be most of the births would be in spring as well. But we're off some of our rhythms. But I think, and I'm not trying to pass on wrong information, but I remember reading something where it actually, in the range of that months, there's still a leaning towards even human reproduction. I don't know if that's true, but I remember reading that. But either way, definitely animals, the sheep and goats are born at that time. And they're born at that time, and then during the Omer process, they're also ripening, just like we are ripening. And this is like spiritual ripening, spiritual growth. And while they're doing that, they're getting the flow of milk. And by the time you get to Shavuot, the milk is over. You're weaned at Shavuot, and there's an element of cheese because there's excess milk. and then you move into the tree knowledge. So Lag BaOmer is this very special moment, sort of in the transference between barley knowledge and wheat knowledge. So we're not going to go into Shavuot, but we're going to go into the barley knowledge and the wheat knowledge. There's a couple of customs that are associated with Lag BaOmer, and that is shooting bows and arrows. So you go out into the field and shoot bows. It's actually a pretty amazing day, if you think about it. Because the way it's celebrated, especially for people that are interested in wilderness or nature connection and outdoors, it literally is, you're supposed to go into the fields, light bonfires, shoot bows and arrows. It's like somebody has to tell you to do that. And it's really fun. There's stories also, as with all things in Torah, there's layers and layers and layers of this same story that is happening. So in the same way that this is that moment of transference between barley knowledge and wheat knowledge, during that growth, heading towards Shavuot, it's also halfway through the climb of the mountain. So it's like you're climbing up the mountain to receive the Torah, and if you, I mean, it's not like I'm a mountaineer, but if you're walking up the mountain, you know, by the time you get to like halfway on a job, it's sort of is a whole different thing. And Shavuot is like that too. So Shavuot is like you're getting up to the top of the mountain, but now you're at the top. So you've reached like the summit, but the sort of halfway into the summit, not impressive. You don't feel great about yourself, and also all the weight and the effort and stress is starting to feel that. So, anyways, the day is go outside, light a bonfire, dance around it, and shoot bows and arrows. So there's stories that are sitting on top of that agricultural story, which is the agricultural story is sitting on top of the seasons, right? Because the reason why we're growing and why we're harvesting and why we're then raising animals and on that, and then having our spiritual development sort of biomimicry on top of that, is that the deepest story is the story of the seasons, of what's happening in the natural world, and each one of these layers are layered on top. So one of the stories that sits on top of the story of the Omer, just of the grain harvest, is the story of the plague of Rabbi Akiva. And Lag BaOmer is known for two different things. It's the day in which, and there's a whole bunch of arguments, where there was a plague of Rabbi Akiva's students, and Rabbi Akiva was it was and is sort of the rabbi of rabbis. I said before, if Moshe Rabbeinu was sort of the visionary of visionaries for the Jews, the prophets of prophets, Rabbi Akiva is sort of like the rabbi of rabbis in two specific ways. The first way is that Rabbi Akiva, this was supposed to be interactive. I was going to have we're going to have sources, but I just wanted to give like a little thing. The first reason why Rabbi Akiva is sort of the rabbi's rabbis is because he had all of these students, and he had thousands of students, but they died in a plague, and that is related to Lag BaOmer. So during the Omer, Rabbi Akiva students are dying, and according to different people, and I don't really want to get into those details because I don't really like every single nuance of that. I don't want to get into it, but basically one concept is that on Lag BaOmer they stopped dying on this day of Lag BaOmer. So this 33rd day of the Omer is the day where the plague stopped. I'm not going to talk about how that relates to our lives, because I'm going to leave it up to all of us to figure out how that relates to our lives. But on Lag BaOmer, the idea is that that is the day that the plague stopped, and that's why we're celebrating. Another reason, and this one was emphasized by the early and even now Zionists that came into Israel, was that really that reading is that Rabbi Akiva's students, he sent. There was the empire, the Roman Empire, and they had controlled They were taking over the world and installing their governments in every land around them, and they would make little vassal states. So Judea had become like a vassal state to the empire, and the Judean revolt, led by Bar Kokhba, forced the empire out for a brief time because empire is empire, and they brought armies from Ireland. They were in the middle of trying to take over the Irish, and they actually, brought recall the troops from Ireland and brought them there to sack the Judeans. That's the amount of trouble that the Judeans caused the empire, that they actually had to take soldiers from as far away as Ireland to try to sack them, and they did sack them. And that was the end of the Bar Kokhba revolt. And so this story says that the Rabbi Akiva students didn't die of a plague. The plague was that they were fighting for Bar Kokhba. And this is just like tongue-in-cheek to say it was a plague, but they were fighting for Bar Kokhba, and they were put down by a thing. And this is when it was over, when the fight was over. There's a lot of different stories. The other one that's layered on top of that is that after Rabbi Akiva's students passed away, he actually has a advice to you in the Pirkei Avot, which he says that a person should have a lot of students, so that if some of them pass away, you'll literally, you should gain a lot of students. So he ended up with, even though he had so many thousands of students, he ended up with some very rare ones in the end. Like instead of his first stage in life was quantity, and the next stage was quality. So two of his major students were Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And Rabbi Meir took his method of learning, which is, Rabbi Akiva he's the son of converts, and he was illiterate until he was 40, and he becomes the rabbi of rabbis. In other words, he's like a bottleneck where the entire tradition kind of like pours through Rabbi Akiva. And there's two reasons for that. It's these two people, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So Rabbi Meir uses Rabbi Akiva's methods of learning, and he creates a proto-Mishnah, which is that Rabbi Akiva worked, like it says, like he learned wisdom like a farmhand, and he would go and take Torah and he would put it into little satchels, and then he would bring it back home and organize it into baskets. So what does that mean? It means that originally Torah is just completely fluid and has no categories. It's really just peering into the wisdom with which the world is created for guidance. You peer into the wisdom, you get the guidance. It flows, it moves, it has no categories, it has no names, it has no hello Shlomo. It has nothing in its way. It's like a living, moving thing. We're gonna have sources, and we're gonna have an interactive conversation. But a living, moving thing. But Rabbi Akiva went and he put it into little baskets, and he put them into categories. So he was the first categorizer. And his student, Rabbi Meir, is the one that makes the proto-Mishnah. He makes a Mishnah. He takes Rabbi Akiva's system, and he puts the Torah into these categories. Zra'im, of course, the first thing is Zra'im, seeds, and then calendars, and then marital law, and then damages, and then holy things, and then purities, Tumah and Tahara, life and death purity. So he gets these sort of categories, and then let's apply all that wisdom, let's pull it into these categories, and then let's kind of like compartmentalize them into little chunks, and they'll be in these categories. That was new, because Torah doesn't really fall into any categories, it just moves. But this was Rabbi Akiva's method. Rabbi Meir took it, and then when the Jews were totally sacked and put into a complete exile from any sort of like indigenous way of being, they used the Mishnah. They had this Mishnah, and they can't, and not they, as we, whatever, in me, but like to hold on to this. And that's the proto-Mishnah. So it then the Mishnah then defines the Talmud, and the Talmud defines like all of Jewish tradition. And that's all coming from this one sort of, I'm going to look at Torah like a farmer, like a farmhand, and I'm going to categorize things and put them into little baskets. And that's what ends up giving form to the Torah. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was his other student. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is the author of the wisdom of the Zohar. So that if the Mishnah is like the outer tradition being sort of put into a bundle and into a basket, the Zohar is the inner tradition sort of being put into a basket. And it says that it used to have to, okay, I don't want to misquote it. It says 70 camels or 7 camels, a whole bunch of camels to hold it. What we call the Zohar now is just what was left. But there's massive amounts of this material. And of course, since it's the inner tradition, it's not at all systematized like the Mishnah. But part of the inner tradition is systematized like the Mishnah. For instance, the Sefer Yetzirah is literally written in Mishnahs, and the Bahir is written in Mishnahs. And the Zohar is sort of like a mystical midrash, so it's like from the same genre of like the Gemara, but it's the inward tradition. And that is the wisdom of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. So this day is the day that Reb Shimon Bar Yochai passed away. So you have an inverse. You have, if all of the first students died in the Omer, this day was the day they didn't die. And if Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's life was unique situation, Lag BaOmer was the day that he died. So you have this inverse in Lag BaOmer. But what's interesting is that it's both are seen as positive. So the stopping of the plague is positive, and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai passing away is positive, and that's because of the way the inner world and the outer world interact with each other. So what is on the inside is flipped from what is on the outside. So when it appears to the surface negative, on the inner world is positive. It's like a reverse. So that's how Lag BaOmer is this moment of this reversal, which is from moving from barley to wheat. Aaron says he heard that the Zohar is filled with stories of wandering and nighttime. Yeah, so the Zohar is basically thank you so much, Aaron, is basically a description of a bunch of wanderings of different sages wandering around, and they're not in like a room, and they were like sitting in sometimes they're in a house, but they're not like, it's not like in a location. They walk to a tree, and then they walk here, and then they walk there, and they go to there, and they're going on these little wanderings, and as they're going through wanderings, they're pondering and opening up. They're opening up with wisdom. So that's any thoughts arising from that?
Well, I missed it a little bit, but the concave and convexity. How did Shimon Bar Yochai kind of work that into the Zohar or into his teaching?
Oh, so there's a very special moment where and it's in the source sheet, so hopefully we might get a chance to read it. So there's a special moment in the Zohar when Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says he's going to pass away, and he would like his students to come, and he actually says, but not you. It's like you got, but not you can come, but not you can't handle it. He has specific who could handle it and who cannot, and then basically when he's there, he says to them, I don't want you to mourn my death at all. And when I pass away, I want it to be a great and massive celebration. I want it to be like a huge party because I'm getting wedded with my creator. There's nothing bad about it at all. He's like completely transcended any idea of there being any negativity involved in that. even though he understands that from the other people's perspective, there's all this loss. So he understands the reaction, but he's trying to teach them a secret of that's not what I want. There's something so beautiful here, and I want you to enjoy it. And that's why that day is a day of celebration. There's actually a movie called Dreams, and Aaron actually has mentioned that the Zohar is full of dreams. And there's a movie called Dreams by Akira Kurosawa. Has anyone seen that one? Okay, so it's a beautiful movie. It's a really wonderful movie. I'm going to wait on that question. Akira Kurosawa has this beautiful movie, which has all these little vignettes of different scenes from human life. It starts with a cherry blossom orchard, and there's these spirits moving through it, and a little boy and a little girl, and then it moves to another scene and moves to like some like nuclear explosion scene, and then there's all these little vignettes. But anyways, at the very, very end of the movie, it shows different examples of the way that like humanity could move. And at the very, very end of it, the it's like an eco village where everybody is in absolute utopia and harmony, and there's a little stream running through the town. And I haven't seen it in a very long time, so if I don't describe it perfectly, I apologize. But it's a little stream running through the town. There's all these little villages, and everyone's working the land, and everything is beautiful, and they're tending the trees, and they're loving each other, and there's just absolute harmony. And there's this old man, I think, that sits by the stream. He's very, very old, and as they go along, they march along, and everyone says hello to him, and he smiles or something like this. And then all of a sudden, halfway through this like unbelievably beautiful eco-utopian scene, the old man dies. He just dies. And in the movie, at least what I remember when I watched it, there's this moment of like, oh, this whole beautiful scene is just like pierced. It's just terrible. And then all of a sudden, you see everyone's reactions, and they're like, and they're so happy, and they take a little parade, and they pick him up, and they have flowers, and they do this huge celebration and songs, and everyone's dancing, and they're so happy, and then they go away. And it's kind of like this moment where like, oh right, like they react. It's like it's a celebration of life. So this is their reaction. It's like it's the most beautiful thing ever, and he's had the most beautiful life. And this is life. Life includes death, and it includes growth, and it includes all these stages. And he just went through a new stage, just like a baby being born, just like a teenager moving into their adulthood, just like an adult, growing up or whatever. Like each one of these stages are celebrated. So, wow, the old man just moves into this new stage. Let's celebrate with him. And they start celebrating. So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai sort of has that. He has that wisdom to share, and that's why Lag BaOmer is that. It's like this day of a complete flip of my reaction to loss, which is fair, right? Because on the surface, it's loss, it's totally lost. There's nothing aside from loss. It's not like, oh, it's not loss. It is total loss. But on the inner quality, it's like reunion with the possible, reunion with the unknown, reunion. And the flip there is like the plagues in the outward story, when the plague stops, it's a holiday. In the inward story, when the life ends, it's a holiday. And depending on the quality of the current that you're flowing in is the reaction, And I'm flowing on the surface a lot, obviously. But okay, so L'chaim. Let's. Who wants to read one of the sources? I can do a screen share. if I can find the. You see that? Does it? Can you give me a thumbs up if you see? Yay. Just like to see the thumbs up. That's also part of Zoom etiquette. I read this first one, but then can somebody let me know if they will? Where's the chat? Okay, so I'll read the first one. As I'll be the sacrifice to go first. Okay, so Bereshis. So I'm reading English. I will maintain my covenant with you. Never. Oh, so this is the part of the Torah, Bereshis, Genesis, story of creation. There's two creation stories. If the beginning is Pesach, is the spring, and Pesach Sheni is the it's never too late. If spring is you can always start again, and Pesach is you can second chances, you can always start again, and Pesach Sheni is it's never too late. The first story in Bereshis is the Pesach, the birth of creation. Noach is the Pesach Sheni, which Lag BaOmer is kind of like a Pesach Sheni, which is it's never too late, right? So even if you're given a world and you completely mess it up, it's never too late. You can cleanse, you can start again, and that's what happens with Noach. He's like this moment, this time of the Omer, which is it's never too late time. And it says here in Noach that I will maintain my covenant with you, and never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of a flood. Never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. And so the idea here is that life and the very structure of the world is very flimsy, delicate, and precious. It's like a little sukkah that is just a little temporary little hut that's totally subjected to the storm outside of this vast potential and wild, chaotic nothingness and inability to even process that with our brains of what's surrounding us. And life and the structure of the world is just a little delicate sukkah that is being held up. And if it's not cared for and it's not cherished and it's not tended, it actually falls apart. It just collapses. And that's the idea of Bereshis, which is that the separation between sea and the night and the day, of light and darkness, and sea and sky, and earth and vegetation, are all these three little, very delicate little sukkahs that are set up that they can fall apart. And if you don't, and if you're not tending life, it collapses back to its original state, which is the void, which is the nothingness. So the story of Noach is an untended world where the gift of life is not appreciated, and it says that the people polluted literally. It says that waste, right, like tashchit, that the earth was being wasted, meaning you wasteful and wasting the earth, cutting down trees, messed up nature. Flood came, and Noach becomes now, if the purpose of man is to tend and to Avda Vishamra, to serve and protect the garden in times of flood and in times of like where the damager is out, where there's a great stress, the call for humanity is to preserve, right? So Noach becomes this great preserver, where he kind of like preserves the seeds of life in a little canister, where he basically takes the hit of the storm and is able to emerge anew. It's a different birth story than let there be light, because that's like Pesach, just start again. But the Pesach Sheni, which is Noach, which is like, yeah, even in the middle you can start again. You just get it get it through. So in this covenant, Hashem says that this is a sign that I set for the covenant between me and you and every living creature with you for all ages to come. And that is the bow and arrow. Sorry, the keshet, the bow, which is the rainbow. So the symbol in Hebrew, the symbol of the rainbow is actually, it's a multicolored bow. And so you see in the sky a beautiful multicolored bow, and that lets you know that as long as you maintain your part, which is to tend the earth and preserve it, then there won't be another something like that, right? It's like a big bow in the sky. So who wants to read the Ramban? Is the screen shared? Oh, Alan raised his hand. I'm going to unmute you.
Okay. Sure. Thank you.
I've been given this power to mute and unmute people, but everybody here is empowered to mute and unmute themselves.
This is the sign of the covenant that I am giving. It seems from this sign that the rainbow was not in the cloud from creation, and now God did a new act of creation to make the rainbow in the sky on a cloudy day. And the reason for the sign was explained, that the rainbow was not created so to look as though someone is shooting arrows from heaven, but rather the opposite, to show that no one is shooting from heaven. This is the way of warriors, to turn their bow over in their hands to indicate that they are calling for peace to those who are fighting against them.
So does that make sense? So you see the bow in the sky. It's like you're holding up a bow, which means I'm not like this. Like I don't want to fight with you as long as you're going to do what you need to do. Okay.
We are forced to believe the words of the Greeks, that from the shining of the sun in moist air, the rainbow will come to be as a result.
Does anyone have anything that they think is about that line on the Ramban?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. He says that we're forced to believe the words of the Greeks, because they use like the exterior sciences and have their categories that are set up really nicely in Javan, which is one of Noach's progeny. So like and Ionia is Greece. So it's interesting because our way of knowing from a Jewish lens is very different than measuring and calculating and doing exterior scientific experiments. But here it seems like it's including the Greeks' way of knowing in our understanding too, kind of like that concave convex is.
Yeah, he's accepting it. He's with it. I don't understand. He's forced, which is interesting. I think by reason alone, right? He's not forced. Like they're not forcing him, right? And I think that's what one of the things that the power of the Greeks was like. I'm not forcing you to think this way, but let's reason. Like let's talk about this, right? Dun dun dun, right? Like you're forced to say this is true because unless you can come up with something better, then you have to accept it, and that's just the way it is, right? And then the person's like, Yeah, you're right. By reason, I have to accept it. So there's like a sort of like a something forceful about
Yeah.
reason.
I don't
Okay.
understand why he had the part where Rabban saying I had to believe the Greeks, but to put it in terms that I understand is that the Greeks were a physical people, their philosophy, and the Jews were metaphysical.
Yeah, but they're so deep. I mean, because the Greeks are so deep, right? Their
I
their
know
their
the
their,
Greeks.
their
I know
stories are
classical
like,
education. Yeah,
yeah. I
but
mean,
yeah,
probably the ones that are the closest to the Torah in that way
is that
are the
right?
Greeks.
Is
They're,
that right?
in that depth of. Anyways,
What is
they're
the
not.
word in that Pesach? The Pesach Hakeshet betoldot, like the rainbow betoldot. Toldot isn't there a parsha that starts with Toldot? Um, I'm sorry. And now
Although
it's moved.
Told
But
out these generations, but I don't see where you are.
it's at the end of that line about we must believe the divrei and the word of the Greeks that say that Shemesh. I'm just trying to remember the line. It moved.
Oh,
Anyway,
like it'll fold out. It's
no, to
like
fold out.
a generation is a result of the progenitor.
Okay.
Progeny
Yeah.
is
Neat. Yeah. I just asked. Okay, that's cool. Neat. Wow.
beautiful. So, Alan, do you want to keep going?
yep. Um, and and when we look again at the language of the text, we will understand this because it says, I have put my rainbow in the cloud. And it didn't say, I am putting in the cloud. When it said, this is the sign of the covenant that I am putting. And the word my rainbow shows that God already had a rainbow from the beginning. Therefore, we should explain the passage thus. The rainbow, which I put in the cloud from the day of creation, should be from this point onwards a sign of the covenant between me and you.
What do you think about that?
So is that saying even if man loses his way, that upside down bow is always there to show that God will not bring another flood and be good?
What do you think the symbol is? Like, what is this? He's like it's a symbol of like, listen, I don't want to fight. Like, is that what it is? He says it's like the way of the warrior, right? It was like if he had the bow out, he would be saying, "Listen, I want to fight." But this is like, I don't want to fight. I don't. I want peace. I don't. You know. But I think the Ramban here is trying to explain. It seems like from the story in the Chumash in the Torah that there was no rainbow, and then the Creator put a rainbow into creation as like part of the deal of this deal, right? But he's saying, no, no, no. It doesn't. We're forced to believe what the Greeks have clearly showed us, that it's a natural occurrence. So like in the rainbow, in moisture, when sun goes through moisture, a rainbow is produced, right? So that means there was moisture before, so a rainbow must have been produced before, right? So it can't be all of a sudden a rainbow showed up. So he's saying that in the beginning, from the reason why the rainbow was created was so that you could look into the sky and have this memory. Oh, the creator doesn't want to destroy the world. The creator is the one that made this flimsy, beautiful little structure of life. It's not like that's the desire of the creator to destroy the world. As long as you help keep this little flimsy love chamber on top of this rock standing, then then we're good, you know.
it's fascinating that Ramban is saying that God, who is non-corporeal, has this very special treasure, which is his rainbow. And God is willing to share that special treasure with us as a sign of the covenant.
Yeah, like it's a bris. Well, the other thing about a bris is that it's like a cut, right? Like a covenant means like I made a cut, it's like treasured. I don't know about everyone here, but what is your emotional reaction when you see a rainbow?
It's much better. I feel much better than when I'm at a bris. It's just, I had trouble even at my son's bris. In fact, I was happy that my second was a girl because I didn't have to, just for a short term, didn't have to go through the bris.
The rainbow doesn't even feed you bagels and stuff.
Yeah, I got that. Yeah, it's true. That's a good point. There's less of the.
And yet it's still better.
Mm-hmm.
Well, for me, it's like you see it, and it's like a wonder. It's like you see the rainbow, and you go, oh, like, oh, this is a beautiful scene. It's kind of like, of course, like there's so much beauty there, and it takes you at like that's why I feel like life is like this attack on me, and it's like antagonistic. I am struggling against life, and the force of life is trying to wipe me out, right? But then I see a rainbow, and I'm like, no, this is a love fest. This is like a beautiful scene here. Life is not trying to wipe me out. It's just that life is fragile and precious, and it doesn't last. It's just the definition of it, and it's beautiful, just like a rainbow. It's like this ephemeral thing that doesn't last, and it's beautiful and it's gonna wipe away. But that's not like life itself is like it's like trying to destroy stuff. Okay, so who wants to read the next one? Because this one is very small. It's like
I'll do this one.
okay. What's number 3?
From Jerusalem Talmud Brachot 65a, Rabbi Chizkiah said in the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah, during the life of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, a rainbow was never seen in the clouds.
Nice.
What does that mean?
In the clouds.
We have a small enough little group here at this time. It's about half. So what is the? I'll go around in a little circle. Benjamin, what do you think? What does that mean?
Well, no one ever saw the rainbow in the clouds during the life of Shimon Bar Yochai. So there was no need for it. Like people just knew. People knew that Hashem had this covenant with us, and we didn't need a reminder right in our faces, giving us all this awe. People just had it already.
So it's positive.
Yeah.
Antonia? Oh. No. Okay. Shlomo, what do you think?
Tonight with
sorry, I didn't.
Am I Shlomo?
That's what you keep telling us.
Okay, so make sure there's no other Shlomo. I was having dinner tonight with some really wise young people, my kids, and they were very angry at Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai because it says that he came out of the cave and he burned some people up. And they were very, very unhappy with that. So I'm just throwing that into the mix, and I'll
Reckless.
pass.
Anyone else? It's not a test. I was told one time in experiential education that you shouldn't ask people things like, does anyone know this or that?
Psachyah?
Yeah.
Finally got in. Can I comment on the rainbow?
Yeah, but can I see your face?
I don't know how to make it work, actually.
Start video.
1 second. I can figure it out. Yeah.
If you hit the top right-hand corner, you'll see the three dots. Then click that and start.
Top right hand. I
Yeah,
don't see.
if like of any screen, even yourself or someone else, you go to the top right hand with your cursor, with your arrow, and then you'll see three dots. And you
Problem
click.
is, I'm on my phone. I'm on my phone. I'm not on the computer.
Oh,
Okay. It's okay, Aaron. I'm sorry. Yeah, sure.
Bottom left.
Bottom left. I'm sorry.
Bottom left.
Yeah, should see an
Digital
icon. There you go, Aaron.
Okay. I don't see myself, but it's fine.
You were
you
there,
see?
then you disappeared.
Oh, I disappeared again?
Yeah, you were there for a second.
You're like a rainbow, Aaron.
Is that better?
You're fleeting. You're fleeting.
Yeah.
Oh.
All right.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so what I was going to say about the comment that they never saw a rainbow in the clouds, it seems that the sun is actually like could be considered gevura in this case because it's fire, it's heat, and the clouds are holding water, which is chesed. And I know it's not that simple to say it that way, but that's how I'll start. And the Tiferes is a completely new creation that like you were saying, Psachyah, when you see it, it kind of heals your internal like feeling of life. And so Tiferet is the Mida that mirrors back where everything comes from, right? It's beauty, so it harmonizes. And it reflects back Hashem in its beauty. Am I still there?
Yeah.
Anyway, that's what I think. So it's its own unique thing. You don't see it in the clouds. You see it as its own, like Hashem looking at you directly.
And Rabbi Shimon Bar, I think it's beautiful. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai.
Well, the story, Shlomo, he came out of the cave and saw people farming and burnt them up. And Hashem said,
no, this is supposed to be agricultural.
what are you wasting your life in this world, on this world? Basically was his condemnation, and he burned him up. So Hashem sent him back with his son into the cave for another 12 months, I believe. And when he came out, he was at peace with what he saw, the same people farming. So I think that story is like indicative of how he learned the meat of Hod, and how he learned that he couldn't judge Hashem's reality. And that's the meat of Hod. You have to appreciate it for what it is, no matter what it is. That's Hod Shebahod. That's why death doesn't face him. And darkness is not an issue, because there is no darkness. So I think that's why I think the day is named after him.
You know what? You know what came up for me when you were talking about that? I think about, like, when do you have that feeling? It's actually when you think you are faced with a possible death, you fight it. But when you see the overwhelmingness of it, then actually then you embrace it, right? You see that in animals.
I would imagine that's the process.
You see it in animals, right? Like, it's okay, here it comes. You know, it's like there's a shift there, and that's what I thought. Did anyone ever see the guy, the double rainbow? Guy watching the double rainbow? Who saw that?
I've seen it.
I have, yeah.
Can I show it?
Yeah, I love that video.
I'm just gonna enjoy showing it. I'll probably get in trouble or something, like it's against the law or something.
Whoa, that's a full rainbow. All the way. Double rainbow. Oh my God. It's a double rainbow all the way. Whoa, that's so intense. Whoa, man. Whoa! Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God! Woo! Oh my! Wow! Woo! Yeah! Oh! Oh my! Oh my God! Look at that! It's starting to even look like a triple rainbow. Oh my God, it's full on double rainbow all the way across the sky. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh God. What does this mean? Oh. Oh my God. Oh. Oh God. It's so bright. Oh my God. It's so bright and vivid. Oh. 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 It's so beautiful.
Okay.
All the way.
It is so, to me, that's like the reaction. Like, if you're able to actually, like, see a rainbow, that's like the human reaction to it. It's like, only if I was, like, in a very callous moment, which I am a lot, but only if I am in a very callous moment, would I just walk right by something like that. But when you just see it and you're not lost in other things and you just experience what it is that kind of reaction. And that is the sort of, like, emotional covenant that happens with the creator when you say, oh, okay, this is what you're doing, like this, you've produced this whole world and this whole life and all of this structure of water molecules and sun going thing to produce this shining, colorful band across the sky. It is this thing of, like, I'm not at war with you. This is not a war. You know, it's very hard to feel that when you're. It's very hard not to feel that. So I don't know. I've been loving this time together. I don't know if I'm going to get to the part where Reb Shimon Bar Yochai goes into the cave, but one of the important parts is that, and maybe if we have time to go into the source, we will. But Reb Shimon Bar Yochai basically gets into a fight with the empire because he says bad things about the Romans. Other people are saying, well, the Romans, they make us highways, and they install aqueducts. They care about everybody, right? And Reb Shimon Bar Yochai is like, what are you talking about? That's not where they build these things. They build highways so that they can march their troops on them, and they build aqueducts for themselves. That they're not. This is not a altruistic thing. And it's interesting, actually, in America, the highway system. I don't think it's a fake. Was actually built to move trucks with missiles on it. So, like, a lot of times, this kind of infrastructure is built for war, not for love. But anyways, so Reb Shimon Bar Yochai says a bunch of bad things about the empire. They put a wanted list on his head, and he runs away to a cave, and he lives there. It says totally naked in a cave, eating nothing but baksar, which is carob, for years on end. And it's there where he gets the revelation of the Zohar, which is, so when he's going back into nature, into the Garden of Eden, into this state of like, well, there's one thing to like take 3 days and go into nature and hear who you are, but there's another thing to become like an utter and complete hermit living in a cave, and drinking from a stream and eating carob. That is like and so there he receives the inner Torah, this inner Kabbalah and mystical wisdom, of which he received the tradition from his teacher, Rabbi Akiva. But here it comes in contact with raw nature and the wilderness. So it's like receiving the Torah again, where it says that the Torah was given in fire, in water, and fire, and in wilderness. That's what the Midrash says. So the Torah is given in water, like the splitting of the sea, where you see the chaos moving away. The Torah is given in fire, which is like the fire on top of the mountain, and the Torah is given in wilderness. The Torah in the wilderness is the inner Torah. So the Kabbalah and the inner part of the Torah is the Torah that is flowing through the wilderness. And when you come and encounter the wilderness, you receive that wisdom. It's the wisdom of the wilderness. You know, the Shimon Bar Yochai is the one who he goes, because he says bad things about the empire, he ends up having to live out in the wilderness for so many years, and then he comes back. If we don't have a chance, I just wanted to make sure to tell that story about Shimon Bar Yochai, because that's where he receives his inner wisdom.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
The story of the giving the Torah at Mount Sinai, does that happen in the book Bamidbar? Is that in the book Bamidbar? Which book of the Torah is it?
It happens in Shemos, and then happens again in Shemos again. And
Okay.
happens a third time in Shemos. And then it's like three weird.
Yeah, there's a lot of repetition with the story of Moses, and
Yeah, and then it happens in Devarim, the fifth book.
but not Bamidbar.
But that time, it's just Moshe telling the story himself.
Yes,
So
that's confusing when he does that.
Yeah, it's not the Torah is not talking. It's
Right.
him,
Yes.
from his perspective, sort of.
Okay, sorry, Shloya.
Who wants to read the Bnei Yissaschar? So Bnei Yissaschar, I can give some context for him. Bnei Yissaschar is actually a Hasidic text, and it has some of the most Kabbalah of the calendar. So for people that are interested in learning the inner wisdom of the calendar, the Bnei Yissaschar is like, it's like his thing. It really is a really beautiful book, and it's connected a lot to the Sefer Yetzirah. So he has a comment on it. Who wants to read that?
I can if you put it up again on the screen.
Woo! Hey.
One particular custom practiced on the day of Lag BaOmer is unique. Children go to parks and fields to play with bows and arrows. What's the reason for this peculiar custom? One well-known explanation has to do with the fact that during Rabbi Shimon's lifetime, no rainbow ever appeared in the sky. This is profoundly significant because Genesis relates that the rainbow represented God's covenant never to destroy the world again, even if the human race would degenerate to its status prior to the flood. But as long as Rabbi Shimon was alive, his merit and piety alone were enough to ensure that God would not regret his creation, with no need for the rainbow. On the day of his passing, however, the world was in need of the rainbow. Thus, each year on that day, we recall this man's greatness by playing with the bow.
So what was his what was the greatness that they're talking about? It's like in some ways, one way to look at it is that he's when you're the why does if you read the Ramban, he's saying that after the covenant, after the flood, meaning when you're living a life that is wasteful and it's out of sync with the natural world, right? And the flood hits you because you've pulled out like sort of the structure of life, and you deal with the brunt of what happens, and then you get cleansed by it. Then all of a sudden, the Creator gives you a rainbow to show you that is not at war with you. This is not a war, right? Just because you just took a massive hit doesn't mean that that's the purpose of creation, is to give you massive hits. There's no war there. Well, the deeper aspect that the Ramban was showing is that was already planned in the beginning of creation, right? He says we're forced to accept the wisdom of the Greeks, which then teaches us an even deeper thing that the Greeks are teaching us. That we might, from the story, think that the rainbow just appeared in the time of Noah, because after you make a mistake, then you realize it's okay. But actually, the rainbow was there from the very beginning. So the mistake that you made was part of the natural world, right? And the rainbow was put in there from the very, very beginning. And now you're just noticing it because of the mistake that you made. So you make a mistake, and then the mistake brings you to a higher realization where you finally see the beauty that was in the creation from the very beginning. And that's why Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the rainbow shows up as his sign. Does that make any sense?
Psachyah, it feels like it's like initiation, like it's like one is being initiated for something, and you don't necessarily know that you're being it, but like it happens. Does that like resonate?
Yeah, could you expand?
I'm not sure. Like, I guess where I was coming from in there was like an initiation of like a journey that one makes. Like, for example, like a journey to like bar bat mitzvah, or like a wedding, a journey of like two souls coming together, like just this kind of idea that like it's always kind of been there, but like the initiation has been there, but like at the same time, like you didn't know like what it was going to be, but like it's always had that way. So it's just like a deeper opening is what like is coming up for me right now.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think that's what a lot of what Shimon Bar Yochai is all about, and Lag BaOmer, which is the initiation. That is what he's sort of saying about death too. So he's saying it's initiation. He's going through a doorway. He's graduated. So don't see it as loss. See it as transformation, right? Like going into the kitchen or something. That's what comes up when I hear what you said. So the next source, since we plan on doing this for an hour and a half, is that moment with Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. So I want to get a thumbs up. Which do we want to read at least this time? We want to read Reb Shimon Bar Yochai's sticking his middle finger up to the empire and then running away to a cave, and then like Shlomo said, frying people with his eyes because he doesn't like human society anymore, or the part of the Zohar where Reb Shimon Bar Yochai calls people in to tell him about his own death. So, own death, thumbs up. Cave, thumbs down. Which one? Thumbs up. Okay, so thumbs up for own death, and cave for thumbs down. Okay. Okay, so I see 4 thumbs up for own death. So I could read it, unless someone else wants to. Any thumbs up to read it? Okay, I'll read it. And I'll screen share it. Is that good? You see the screen? And then maybe we could go back to Reb Shimon Bar Yochai fighting with empires. Okay. So we have learned, on the day that Reb Shimon Bar Yochai was to depart from the world, he began arranging his teachings. Okay, and there's a translator, and in this text, there's the black part of the text is the original text, and the translator has done us a favor of non-bolding the text that is as an explanation. I just want to let us know that. Okay. The disciples of Reb Shimon found out that he was making his final arrangements, and they gathered together at the house of Reb Shimon. And before him were Rabbi Elazar's son, Rabbi Abba, and the disciples, so that the house was filled. Then fire surrounded the house, so that everyone fled outside. And when Rabbi Shimon looked up and saw the house was full, he cried and said, "On another occasion, when I was deathly ill, Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair was with me, while I was choosing my place in Gan Eden. They granted me extra years until now, and when I returned to the living, a fire surrounded me, and it never stopped, so that no person could come into me without permission." I don't know, I could just stop there and sit with that for a while, but so this fire surrounding him. I'm not going to read the commentary. Now I see that it has ceased, so the house was filled up with visitors who entered without permission. And while they were sitting, Rabbi Shimon opened his eyes and saw what he saw. He experienced the revelation of the Shekhinah. And then fire surrounded the house so that everyone fled outside, leaving only Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Abba. The remainder of the students sat outside, and Rabbi Shimon said to Rabbi Elazar, his son, "Go outside and see if Rabbi Yitzchak is here. I made him a promise that he would live until the day of my passing, and that I would take him into the Garden of Eden. Tell him to put his affairs in order, and then come and sit with me and be happy with his lot." There was a moment when I lived with a big community of Chassidim, and I remember one time there was an old man who was going around, and he was paying everybody back every single thing that he thought he owed them. And I was there when he did that. He didn't think he owed me anything, but he felt like he owed somebody $1.50. He was sitting right next to me, and he paid it back. And he said, "I'm going to be passing away soon, and I want to arrange my things." And he gave him $1.50. So the holy matters, I'm not saying that that's what they were doing, but The holy matters that I did not reveal until now, I want to reveal in the presence of the Shekhinah. So the Shekhinah is there with Reb Shimon. And the Shekhinah is the feminine presence of Hashem, and it's floating in the room. And Reb Shimon arose in deference to the Shekhinah and the souls. And he then sat again, smiling and happy, and he said, "Where are the students?" And Rabbi Elazar arose and brought them in. And they sat down before Reb Shimon, and Reb Shimon raised his hands in prayer and made his supplications with great joy. And then he said, "Those who were in the Idra Rabbah are invited." That was this gathering that they had to stay, but not the rest of the visitors. Thus, they're going to put themselves in danger right now. So they all went out. And only Rabbi Elazar and his son, and Rabbi Abba, Rabbi Huda, and Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Chia remained. And meanwhile, Rabbi Yitzchak arrived. And Rabbi Shimon said to him, "How fortunate is your life? How much joy should be added to you on this day?" And Rabbi Abba was sitting behind Rabbi Shimon's shoulders, and Rabbi Elazar before Rabbi Shimon. And Rabbi Shimon says, "Now is an auspicious time to reveal secrets of the Torah. I wish to enter into the world to come without shame. For the holy matters that I did not reveal until now, I wish to reveal in the presence of the Shekhinah, so that no one will say that I left the world without fulfilling my task." He sees his task as sharing the wisdom that he has. "And that I concealed these secrets in my heart until now, so that they would come with me to the world to come. I will present them to you," Rabbi Abba shall write, "and Rabbi Elazar, my son, will review them, and the remaining disciples must whisper them in their hearts." And so this is the end of Reb Shimon's life, and so he's already come out of the cave, and now he has all these students that are learning Kabbalah. I see that today is special, for God and all the tzaddikim are rejoicing in my celebration. And here the translator says Hilula. Hilula is like, instead of thinking of death as a loss, Hilula means like a party. It's like my party. So now he's at the point, he's referring to his own death as, I see that all the tzaddikim are rejoicing at my party. It's like a party to him. Rabbi Abba rose from behind Shimon's shoulders, and they sat before Shimon, and Rabbi Elazar continued sitting with Rabbi Shimon. And Rabbi Shimon said, "Arise, my son, for another will sit in that place." And Rabbi Elazar arose and sat down somewhere else. And Rabbi Shimon wrapped himself up in his talit, which is his garment, like a square garment, and he sat down and said, "The dead do not praise the Creator, nor do those who go down in silence, and the dead do not praise. This truly means that those who are called dead, even when they are alive, for God is called eternally living, and he dwells among those who are also called life, and not among those who are called dead, even during their lifetimes, for they don't cleave to the source." And at the end of the verse, "Nor do those who go down into silence, those who descend into silence will remain there," meaning only those who descend, I'm doing a very fast reading, only those who descend to silence permanently will not praise, whereas those who experience temporal spiritual anguish after do return to utter the praises. But those who are called alive are different. The Holy One, blessed be He, desires their honor. And Rabbi Abba recalls, "I was writing in the middle of quoting a verse, and Rabbi Shimon stopped at the word Chaim. I waited wanting to continue, but did not raise my head to see why Rabbi Shimon had stopped, for I was unable to look at the great light that was shining around him. And suddenly I heard a voice call out the verse with the word Chaim, life. And then another verse called out an additional verse. And I fell to the ground and I cried. When the fire and the light departed, I saw the great light. Rabbi Shimon had passed away, and he was lying on his right side, and he was smiling." So this description where he says to his students that what they see as dead and loss is like requires a new reading, right? So up until now, you defined life as from the moment you were born until you go into the grave. But he's saying that this moment where I'm going to the grave is not the death. And I wasn't born when I was born, and when I go into the ground, I'm not dead. But that when I'm connected to this to the source of this whole experience, then it's life. And when I'm detached, and I guess you could say, what is it, unexamined, then it's called dead, right? So if I'm just hovering over the surface of things and seeing everything from external purposes, then it's like a body. And a body without the life inside is like a dead body, right? It's death. So the attachment to the mechanical movements of experience is not life, but the source of life, the thing that's flowing through that, the attachment to that moves through bodies, right? So when one body goes into the ground, that source is moving into another body. So I'm not seeing the loss there because I'm looking at the force and the source that is moving through bodies. But if I'm attached to the bodies, then I'm not just talking about like human bodies, then I'm not in life. And then so he's saying that you should see this as a great party because now I'm shifting into a different body. And part of what goes on in continuing this teaching of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is the idea that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is in every, it's not his name, it doesn't have the same name, but that same way of life and that same spirit moves through many, many different bodies. So you have the Shekhinah that pours into all the bodies, and when someone opens up their mouth and they speak of those inner secrets and the inner part of life, they speak of the love that connects every being together, and they speak of life that transcends bodies, and they're talking about that stuff. That's like the Shimon Bar Yochai within them, right? And that Reb Shimon Bar Yochai is not saying, don't worry, my body's not going away. Let's just have a party because my body's staying. He knows that his body is going to the ground and it's going to be recycled. But he's not living in a body. He's living in the source and the Shekhinah, which is the feminine presence of the Creator within inside of all creation, the force that's moving through it, and the love that creates the bounds and bounds between all of the bodies. And that is what I'm living. And so he starts calling it a party. And then he said, and then you don't have to be depressed that your teacher went away because your teacher is inside of you. You don't have to be depressed that your lover went away. It's your lover is inside of you. You don't have to be depressed that your life is like on pause because it's always there. And if I personally, I'm just going to talk about like own disclosures. I actually get frustrated and angry when I lose myself in external things and don't see the tree of life passing through everything. So like if I get lost in like the anger of a certain moment, or I get lost in the frustration of like a certain trajectory, it's sort of like in a sense for me like a prison. But when I can get in touch with the love and the life that is moving through all these bodies, then all of a sudden I personally just like I'm able to let go of that, like not be so. And what for me it does is it doesn't make me, well, it does make me not like bodies. I love bodies. So it doesn't like, it's not like a rejection of the body. It's just understanding that the thing that I love about it is the force that moves within it and not the external. So we have just one little moment, and I want to share this one little thing, and it actually is about another story. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, these are people who are considered important in this world and important in the world to come. And this is like the incident of Rabbi Yosef, the son of Rabbi Shua ben Levi. He became very ill and was about to die. And then he returned to good health. And his father said to him, so this is in the Gemara, it's in the Psachim. and Tractate Psachim, and it's a story of like a near-death encounter or a death encounter. And he returned to good health. And so basically he died, and he went into a coma or something, and then he returned. And his father said to him, "What did you see there when you were about to die?" And he said to him, "I saw an inverted world. Those that were above and those who were considered important in this world were below, insignificant. And while those below and those who are insignificant in this world were above." So he said to him, "And my son, you have seen a clear world," right? The world that it's like you didn't see an upside down world, right? You saw it with clarity, right? Meaning that a lot of times we look at the accomplishments of somebody and we give them credit and we say, "Oh, look at this person," right? But you're not looking at the resources that went into the person, right? So you're just looking at the production of the person. And you say, "What an accomplishment." But all these resources poured into the person. And then one can judge the external of a person and see, "Oh, look at how little they accomplished, or how little they show up on my radar as important," right? But there's so little resources that poured into it. I'm not talking about financial resources, but that's true too. But just like someone who struggles with an ailment, right? And life is just dealing with that ailment, then no one goes and says, "Oh, wow, what an accomplishment." But if you're talking about the inner quality of the person, to be able to push through life, you are then humbled. You're like, "Oh my Lord, like look what this person went through, and look what they're dealing with, and look what they're able to accomplish." They're like a massive being of light, right? But they, on the surface, show up as not accomplishing much, right? So when he goes into the world, into this flipped world, then he sees all of the actual internal source of strength that people have, that doesn't ever show up in the external world, and it's a whole different story. And then his father says, "No, you saw exactly what it is. That's actually more clear. It's a more clear way to look at the world." And then this is, I think, kind of funny because it's just a bunch of rabbis. So he says to him, "And what about us?" He's talking about the rabbis. So Rabbi Yosef says, "Oh, just like you're over here, you're like there, the same thing," which I always think is a funny, I personally think is really funny, because it's like, I don't know what that means even. Like, what does that mean? What are they considered here? Annoying or tolerated? I'm not sure exactly what they are. But it's like, he's like, "Well, what about us? What are we?" And you're like right on. It's like no difference. You're like, you are what you are. You're not that impressive here, and you're not that impressive there. It's like a funny. I guess that's what it's saying. Does anyone have another reading of that? But it's really, I like it. Anyways, another reading of it can be, and then we should probably go. Another reading of it can be that they're particularly scholars, right? So in the world of the mind, it's like it has no. It's just descriptive, right? So if you have clarity of mind, then maybe you don't go either way. It's possible. Or they're like doorways, right? Which is like, right, there's that direction and that direction, and they're the ones that are like they're the ones that are like the ones that usher through doorways, as opposed to the they're on the fence. What anything came up from that? The last part, especially.
I noticed a little anti-left-handed bias at the very end, just a very small detail that when Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai dies, he's on his right side. Maybe Yamin, right, is justice. He ended his life a just man. I could be wrong. I'm a left-hander, so I'm a
You're
little
left-handed. Yeah, you're
sensitive.
left-handed.
Yeah, small point, very small point.
Well, in this world, it's definitely not a good, but in the inner world, it's a much more amazing quality. My oldest daughter, Ahava, is left-handed.
I'm also left-handed, and pretty much half of my family is. So it's.
I heard. Is it true? Well, whatever. It's probably there's no way to judge that. No. I heard they're creative, right?
Yeah, I mean, like every left-handed I know is, but like it could be debated.
Shlomo says a very beautiful thing in the chat. I think that the rainbow is an awakening into sunshine after an intense cry. It's like God drying our tears. It's an awakening saying, it's good to be okay. Right? It's like comes after the rain. I know there's this state that in the natural world, there's this state that I really love, which is before the rain, right? It's like, it didn't rain yet. You know it's about to rain, and it's coming, and it's quiet, but it's like this, I don't know, it's just like, it's the air gets really wet, right? And there's like this calmness, but the calmness is a sign that's about to hit. And I know that after the rain, it's just like what Shlomo said, it's like boom, rain, and then it's like it's like for me it's like an expiration, like you just took it's like the after the rain moment is also is that
I think it's like when a kid like throws a tantrum or something, and then somehow and they're crying and crying, and suddenly you get them to stop because you distract them somehow, and they look up and they sort of like look around, and they realize like the world still exists and everything is still okay. You know, that's how I see like a rainbow.
yeah, and that relates to Noach's story, right? The story of Noach is like a huge tantrum on Hashem's side. It's the creator's tantrum. And then and it's also Shimon Bar Yochai, right? It's like a huge plague, and then the plague stops, and it's like
I wonder if Shimon Yochai wanted to give all of his wisdom away before leaving this world, in like kind of in order to be like the least among us, like in the inverted world. So like he didn't have anything else. He gave it all away. He wasn't keeping anything for himself. So he didn't have anything. So then in the inverted world, he's actually one of the greatest. I mean, yeah.
that's beautiful. Yeah, it's like he's giving everything away. There's a moment with I think it's Yeshayahu. Yeah, where he gets called to God. He's like, he gets this moment of like, it's time to be a prophet, and he shacks all his cows and he makes a big party for everyone, gives everything away, and leaves. Which is like, it's like an interesting. It's like that's his reaction. He's like, all right, well then I'm going to give everything away to everybody. Goodbye. And like, and this is like the inner quality of that. It's like, oh, I'm about to move through this transition. It's like a rummage sale. It's like everything's being given.
It feels like they're like when I personally give like material away, it's almost like I've like cleansed and like renewed, and there's like a deeper there's like a deeper teaching. Like I had to like give that away, and then something comes through, like just because I've been moving and transitioning, like I've just felt that really like in my body, but also like in my experiences with external realms. And so I think that's really interesting, Psachyah.
Oh, it's the giving away, right? Letting go.
You have to make space before something new can arrive.
Yeah, it's like the Rambam says you have to train yourself to say, I don't know. Like in the path to wisdom is an actual meditation of just continuing to say, I don't know, 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 until it finally dawns on you that you don't know. And then when you finally get it, that you don't know, then all of a sudden, he says the wisdom just like pours in. And, because like until you realize you don't know anything, then there's just nothing can penetrate that impervious knowledge of everything. It's like I think that was also related to the inner Torah, right? Because the inner Torah you can only get the inner Torah if you can admit to not knowing anything, and you have to not know everything, down to the most obvious thing. Like, I don't know what's life and death, right? So I can only feel the Shekhinah moving through bodies if I could admit that, okay, maybe my definition is a little antiquated, like maybe I have to let go of that. Right? I went through a transition one time where I decided I need to throw away all my books, and it wasn't anything that like was wrong to throw away. I don't know. I took it was when I was 20 years old, and I had like a whole bunch of bookcases, and I was like, these have to go. They're like holding me back, and I went whoosh, and I started throwing them into the into the garbage, whatever you call that, like tank. And by the time I did like the third one, there was a guy with a pickup truck smiling and taking them out and putting them in. And he said, "You don't have to throw them in there; just put them into my truck." So, and I just gave them all away, and then he ran away with them. But now when I'm older, I'm like, I can't believe I did that. Like, I could have let go of those books and kept them, but my 20-year-old self just couldn't do it. I couldn't keep the books and let go of them. I had to actually let go of them.
No, you shouldn't regret that. Some of us have schlepped our books everywhere we moved, and every time we move, it's like, why do I have so many books?
I want to give background. Scott's a librarian, more as well as a farmer.
Yeah, I have tried to pare down my book collection. I admire your 20-year-old move.